Hey guys, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening from whatever location you're tuning in. I welcome you to a brand new day where we have a brand new show, The Point, where we have conversations with thought leaders on different thematic issues and topical issues affecting our country. And on stage today, we are privileged to have a man who's going to help us have a conversation on a number of issues affecting our country. And without much ado, I'm going to give him a chance to introduce himself before we start the conversation. Karibu.
Thank you very much, my brother and good friend, Mr. Duncan Otieno, for having me on your show. It's a very good privilege, and I'm looking forward to having interesting conversations with you on different political issues.
Thank you so much. Just for the benefit of those who don't know you, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my name is Sitati Wasilwa. I work with a Singapore-based company that focuses on geopolitical risk analysis. I currently work as a manager for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, specifically an information services manager. And I also double up as a senior geopolitical analyst.
Thank you so much for that elaborate introduction.
Yeah.
For purposes of putting this conversation into context, and we'll have a discussion that touches on a number of issues affecting the country, and no one fits the bill other than someone who sleeps, wakes, and drinks matters geopolitical. And to put the conversation into context,
Yes.
Would you kindly paint for us the state of the nation, touching basically on the scorecard for this current regime, because we know that which cannot be monitored, cannot be measured. And as someone who works on these issues, we want to an appreciation of where are we from an observer's perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good starting point, Mr. Otieno. First of all, on a scale of 10, I would rate this administration at around I think 3.5 to 4. 4, in fact, in my opinion, would be too generous.
Yes.
And that can be seen through the different issues as far as government management has been going on. For the last almost 1.5 years now, 2 years in a few months to come.
Yes.
But my starting point then definitely will be on economic policy management, which, as the data points, things are not really rosy. As far as the ministry, the National Treasury, ministry, and generally the leaders of the Kenya Kwanza regime would want to say, okay, we have positive, economic growth rate, perhaps one of the most impressive in the world, but it doesn't really capture the real picture on the ground on what is happening. We still have lots of, relatively high unemployment rates across the country, and then worst of all, we have taxation issues, which are affecting the common citizens, especially on the cost of living. And still on the economic policy management, what has been happening over the last 1.5 years is the fact that with this regime, its pro-Western policy, which it has adopted, has clearly brought in the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to, basically do the whipping as far as economic policy management is concerned. So those are teething issues, which unfortunately have not really made the lives of most Kenyans to be good. But then again, that contravenes what this philosophy of the hustler narrative, what it stands for, which is the bottom line, the fundamental basis of this particular administration. It goes against that,
Yes.
So apart from that, the cost of living, as I've mentioned, the eradication of subsidies. I know maybe from the sort of school of economic thought that you belong to, you might have a contrary opinion to that. But I believe for countries which are still developing, it's really integral that subsidies still put in place, at least to make the lives of the common people a little bit better. But then again, it doesn't stop that at that point. The general outlook, even of the cabinet secretaries themselves, I mean, you look at the competencies and the quality of the CSs that we have in office, very few of them, not more than 4. The rest, you can say, these guys are just there maybe to, do the whipping as far as politics is concerned. And I look at the cabinet more as a political machine, engineered to, towards the 2027 general election, and less towards, like having a grand master team that is out to at least change the fortunes of the country in the short term. And that leaves a lot to be desired, because again, the study of power politics, it's always important to understand that a leader is only as good as the people
left hand surrounds him.
Absolutely,
yes,
and that has always been the lesson down, as far as the history of humanity is concerned, as far as leadership is concerned, the people whom you surround yourselves with. Especially if you're the appointing authority, then it communicates a lot about who you are and what you stand for at the end of the day, And finally, on very small issues such as communication, public communication carried out by, could be the cabinet secretaries or even the principal secretaries. Sometimes there's lots of confusion. And one very good example which has stood out for the last 1.5 years, the communication from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There's always some controversy. The PS is sharing some sort of information that carries different communication or different meanings. And then the previous cabinet secretary and even the current one, they also have their own versions of the information which is to be shared. But specifically to break it down, when the Israel-Hamas war broke out last year on October 7th, we had certain communication from the president, but then again when the president went to Saudi Arabia for some... yes, he appeared to have changed tune, the same or something similar can also be said when this administration first came into office on the issue concerning, Morocco and the Western Sahara. These are two territories which have always had historical issues.
Yes.
So the Kenyan government or the current administration appear to have favored, Morocco. That seemed to have the Western Sahara fellows. But then again, some controversies arose, and few other examples as well, which we can as well go ahead to point out. So those sort of controversies are what generalize the performance of this regime.
Thank you for that elaborate context. You've raised a number of issues which I would wish to follow up on.
Yes.
One of it, I would start with, of course, in your very humble opinion, you hold a view that 4 would be a generous score for this regime, for the shortest time that have been in place.
Definitely.
And you say that there are 2 schools of thought. One school of thought believes that you need to subsidize production. There's another school of thought that you need to subsidize consumption. You appear to be voicing for subsidizing consumption. And the regime holds a view that you need to subsidize production.
Yes.
Where should we strike a balance in the two? Is it possible to have both, a mix of both, or will you just be liberal that if it's subsidizing production, you subsidize production in anticipation that production would yield returns, and as it returns, find a way to the market. That's how the economy will be able to be grown. Or do you hold a view that people, and I have no dog in this fight, as a disclaimer, I have no dog in this fight. Or you hold a view that you need to subsidize consumption because the economy with dead people is actually nothing. Because you have to subsidize people so that they are able, subsidize consumption that people are able to afford basic products and services, for them to be able to participate in a meaningful economic activity in the country. So where should we strike a balance between subsidizing production and subsidizing consumption, in your very humble opinion?
Well, in my understanding of economic policy and studying as well, having been a student of economics early on in my formative years, I mean, I still take keen interest in, as far as economics is concerned. There are different schools of thoughts, how we understand it as far as economic practice is concerned. But how I look at issues is the application of certain policies depends or should be guided with the prevailing context.
Yes.
You know? For example, in a situation where we do not really produce heavily, or our production seems to be quite low, such that we end up even, importing more than what we produce. That simply means consumption has to be subsidized. But in situations where we have the capacity, we've already done the groundwork pretty well. We've identified which sort of areas that can do pretty well, and we also don't have governance issues that can drag these things like corruption, for example. Then I think production can be subsidized. But then again, it's also important to mention that there are certain external issues that come into play as far as offering subsidies is concerned. I'll give a very good example. What we have in this regime is the dominance and the influence, as I mentioned early on when we started this conversation, of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. Of course, these are institutions, globalized, but I mean, the United States plays a very key role in facilitating
decide who becomes the president of the
World Bank. Absolutely. So when you look at that, then you have to understand that the kind of policies that whatever these governments of developing countries adopt, they are largely influenced by external parties. So I'm very sure when you read through the economic history and the policy history of the World Bank and the IMF, you'd hardly find them, advocating for consumption to be subsidized, because of this neoliberal approach that they have taken since, the early 1970s. So it's really critical to answer you precisely that context is always important,
very important,
as far as the application of any economic policy is concerned. So if we do away with corruption, for example, myself, I come from maize growing region. That's Trans Nzoia County. That's my home county. But unfortunately, who are given preference when it comes to these farm inputs, the subsidized farm inputs? They are the large-scale farmers. So at the end of the day, what happens is we don't have, heavily subsidized or heavy subsidization at the production level. So if the government then decides to streamline everything at the production point, then that will create a sufficient base for production to be subsidized. But as it stands, we don't produce enough maize. We heavily import maize from neighboring countries here, even as far as South Africa, and even sometimes in Central or Southern America. So in that case, I only think it's fair enough that then production is subsidized. But if everything else then works, we won't really have issues with subsidizing production.
Fair enough, you've made your case. Second thing I want to follow up on is for you to give it the current regime a score of 4 out of 10. Then in your very humble view, there is something that either is working or has capacity of working. What is it that this regime has gotten right ever since they came into being, or what is it that they have the capacity of getting right, if what is to be done or put in place?
It's really hard to point out any positive accomplishment by this administration. It's very difficult. What we have so far, very good promises, by the way, made.
So they've done very well on premises.
Promises, 100%. I mean, 10 out of 10.
Yes.
But
Delivery.
in terms of delivery,
Yes.
it's absolute. I mean, you can't even speak about it. It's embarrassing. Yeah. So I can't see any right thing to point out that this administration has clearly achieved. You mentioned about education.
Yes.
What positive thing can we talk about education? Nothing really. You have, in fact, funding slashed for educational institutions. Primary schools, the capitation is wanting. Secondary schools, tertiary institutions. Look at the state of public universities right now. It leaves a lot to be desired.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You look at the health sector. What is going on? And even with the current shenanigans to do with the strikes by medical doctors, pharmacists, and dentists.
Clinical officers.
It's clinical officers and those others who are involved. It's not really something that you can point out that this administration then is doing well in a certain area. I think it's proper failure. But maybe just to some icing on the cake, probably. On climate change, issues to do with climate change advocacy, green financing and whatnot. I think that could be one positive thing, but it's not that really positive because the Kenyan public, at least a larger proportion of the Kenyan public, may not really be having an understanding of what all these things have to do with climate change, carbon credits, carbon trading and whatnot. And you have so many foreign companies, by the way, which are getting involved in all this carbon trading and issuance of carbon, emission permits and whatnot.
Yes.
And I really imagined, I've been telling most of my friends, and even in my social circles, one thing that I have been I have been saying around is I never really imagined, because I remember when studying economics at school, we did one very interesting course unit in our fourth year of study, environmental economics. And we studied all these things to do with carbon emissions, carbon trading, carbon credits. I never really imagined it would happen this fast, especially in Africa. I didn't imagine that. It's been only a practice in other, smaller parts of the world. So probably that's a positive thing, but I think the issue to do with carbon emissions and climate change it's way exaggerated in Africa. We don't really have high emissions compared to these other parts of the world. And you see, we also need to develop our industries. So when you have all this kind of agenda in Africa, then that kills our hopes for industrialization. Yeah.
Thank you. In your view as an observer who sits out there and looks at these things and try to make sense of them, what would you say are the two major ills or challenges bedeviling this regime that is standing in its way to harmonizing its promises with reality?
Well, maybe not two. But the first major one, in fact the only thing, but I'll also mention the second one as well, but I think the biggest of them all is leadership. There's a very big problem as far as leadership is concerned. As far as this regime.
So we have a problem of leadership.
We have a very big problem with leadership, a very big one. And this is a systemic issue. And talking about leadership, leadership is a very broad term, but I feel that people complicate leadership. The only danger with democracy and the only danger with politics, a plural kind of political system, is you have, all the bad apples are in the basket.
One basket, yes.
And then the good apples in another basket. So it's for the voters to decide at the end of the day who foots the bill based on their perceptions, emotions, and logical feelings or conclusions that they may have mentally,
Why I feel like that, so that you can add on this, I hold a view, and I've heard it for the longest time,
Yeah.
and not even time is about to improve it.
Mm.
I hold a view that there's a distinction between leaders and folks in leadership positions.
Mm.
Do you share that view?
Very much. I agree with you 101% on that. In fact, as they say, there's a very big difference between, anyone can be in leadership, but not everyone can be a leader. Just like manager and leader, those are two different things.
Are you saying we have a lot of folks in leadership position?
Yeah, we just
that
have.
would be part of the problem that they're bringing us as a country.
I mean, we have time wasters occupying these leadership positions.
Yes.
People are not really motivated by, to improve the lives of the common man. And to give you a very, some sort of broader perspective on that, this administration has the fondness of, trying to prop up the narrative that Kenya is the next what? Singapore of Africa.
Yes.
Do we believe in that?
I have no incentive to do that. I have no, the level of evidence before me does not seem to suggest.
Absolutely. When you look at the way Singapore has evolved over time, it's a really fascinating story as far as governance and leadership are concerned. In the late 1960s until the early 1970s, the sort of narrative, and even it is backed up by the available data, Kenya and Singapore economically, our gross domestic product, the so-called GDP, were
comparing paripasu. Yes.
Right? But look at Singapore right now and then compare with Kenya. You'd think it's absolutely. You can't even compare. We can only contrast, that sort of thing. What enabled Singapore to get to that place, and why has Kenya appeared to be timing in between, making progress and then stagnating, also coming, digressing at some point. Why? It's all about leadership. All the fantastic, well-performing institutions, even the smallest level, or the smallest, the most basic social institution, which is the family. Why are certain families? Why do they appear to be doing well? Why do others appear to be chaotic? It's about leadership. You can look at any other example, organizations. Why do some organizations perform well? Why do others not seem to perform well? It's all about leadership.
Yes.
So for Singapore, they have one interesting story. Their leadership as imagined, envisioned, and practiced by their former leader, Lee Kuan Yew, is that it has to be based on three pillars: meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty. Those are three pillars which guide overall Singapore's leadership. So, in terms of meritocracy, do we appoint people on merit? This administration has demonstrated.
Yes, and mine are aligned.
Yes. So this administration has demonstrated to us that you can just pick anybody from the street and appoint them. The other day they appointed a consul general for Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That guy couldn't even express himself when he was being vetted in Parliament, right?
Yes.
And many other people that
and probably, I expected you to mention that could be the only thing that this is not right by rejecting the appointment of the
well, fair enough, but
we also have the flip side of it. There is a former MP who was appointed ambassador Accra.
Yes.
He declined, he didn't appear for vetting, but he was gazetted as ambassador.
Exactly.
Yes.
So why would
someone was showing that I do not want to have anything to do with the job and is being forced to take the job?
Yes. And many other things. Even if we are to assess the competencies of most of the cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, and even the controversial what are they called, chief administrative
Yes,
secretaries?
yes, yes.
How many of them appear to be competent? Very few.
I cannot exhaust my first
Exactly.
thing.
Absolutely.
I can't exhaust, yes.
And that is the point.
Mm.
So you have meritocracy.
Yes.
You have pragmatism.
So for the benefit of our viewers, you were saying that it's about getting the right person to do the job.
Yes.
That's what about merit is all about.
Yes,
Yes.
and even for the different leadership positions that I've been privileged to have held in different organizations, even in my current job, you know, the first principle of leadership is getting the right people for the right job.
Yes.
The bus or your vehicle must have the right driver. Once you get that right, you're almost
You are sure of the destination.
Yes. And later on, when we'll be exploring other thematic areas for this discussion, I'll demonstrate to you why even fellows like Kibaki, yes, Kibaki had a very good opportunity to change this country,
Yes.
but he failed on a few things. But if you look at him, you'll appreciate, and even during that,
we'll come
yes.
we'll come
So
to this.
at the end of the day, anyway, merit
Meritocracy, pragmatism,
and honesty.
honesty.
Honesty is self-explanatory.
Yes.
I mean, corruption, you have to kill it.
Yes.
You have to kill it.
Yes.
We lose a lot of money because of corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Pragmatism.
Mm-hmm.
You remember when you asked me about subsidization of consumption and production. I said context is important.
Yes.
So we have to be pragmatic
Yes.
to our social, political, and economic realities.
Yes.
What works for us?
Yes.
Not adopting everything that is being thrown our way. But
Yes.
okay, let's chop off this because they have said, the masters have said it. We have to fine-tune everything based on our, our prevailing realities.
Yes.
That's what pragmatism means, and so on and so forth. So leadership is the bottom line. And of course, related to what I mentioned about corruption. Corruption is basically all these honesty issues. So even this administration, during the campaigns in 2022,
Yes.
the willingness or, any promises to fight corruption didn't really come out clearly.
In fact, our senior, who is the chair for Council of Economic Advisors,
Yes.
appeared alongside Odoro Ngwen during that time when they were discussing the manifesto and the debates. And he made it categorically. He removed every doubt. He said, we are not running this campaign on account of fighting corruption.
Absolutely.
Feel free to run on that campaign. We are not running. So it would be unfair for anyone to accuse them for not fighting corruption because during the campaigns they say that they are not going to make their campaign around fighting corruption. They allowed the Azimio regime team to run with that. So yes, you are right. Even these discussions of fighting corruption are coming late in the day. And there is no sincerity or genuineness in matching their words with their actions.
Absolutely. So leadership is a very big challenge for this administration, and then corruption, another big problem. Those are two key things that I mentioned.
You have picked an issue from where is it from?
Well, all these issues are intertwined with
leadership.
The two things that I've mentioned.
That is true.
That, and you see, anyway, I could kind of be fair enough to this regime as far as debt is concerned. Debt issue started with, anyway, we cannot excuse maybe the president because he was still the number 2 in the previous regime. That's where all hell broke loose. There was too much, stealing and misuse of public funds generally from the borrowed funds, and a reporting of the actual state of debt, and misreporting as well. All those issues. And we can't really say, okay, let's point out where did this money go to. We can't see that. Very few projects, for heaven's sake, can only be seen to have been the outcomes of whatever money was being borrowed. So unfortunately, for this administration, I think it's not going to slow down anytime soon as far as borrowing is concerned. So that's it's a necessary evil.
And what we are saying is that what we are not saying from what you're saying, because one of the things is as much as you're you learn from what someone is saying. So be keen on what they're not saying. You are saying that we are not off the hook with regard to taxation.
We are not.
Yes.
That's well, we are not off the hook, but I think this administration has kind of gone overboard in some ways as far as taxation is concerned.
Yes.
It has clearly gone overboard because if you are targeting to tax, like you remember the other day when we had Central Kenya MPs surprised that now farm products are going to be subjected to taxation.
Yeah, through e-teams, yes.
I mean,
they passed the law, which
absolutely. Then what are you doing in Parliament? And those are leadership issues which I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, we are not off the hook as far as taxation is concerned. I mean, high taxation, or that is also correlated. I mean, with debt issues. You know,
where is common mwananchi in all this? The electorate, where are they in all this? Because you say that leadership appears to be a major problem. And these leaders didn't just wake up one day and find themselves in those positions.
Of course.
So where is the mwananchi in all this? Are they vulnerable? Are they helpless? Is there something they can do?
But you guys decided to mutilate this constitution when clearly it had written, it was clearly written that citizens will have the right to recall.
Yes.
These representatives who appear not to be satisfying or meeting, doing their jobs well in Parliament or whatever representation level. So they carefully did away with that, the formative stages of the implementation of the current constitution. But you know what? Most of the citizens, because these leaders, they are a true reflection of who the citizens are.
Yes, that is what the Honorable Ndole told us, that leaders are just a mirror of.
Yes, we have good. Yes, we have good leaders. We have good citizens,
yes,
right?
Yes.
We have bad leaders.
We have bad
citizens.
Yes.
Right? Unfortunately, I think we have a higher number of bad leaders and bad citizens than the good ones. This country generally lacks discipline and order. From the very basic things, the collection of, what do you call it? You walk along the streets. Garbage collection.
Yes, littered all over.
Those are very basic things that tell you that our society is confused and totally disorganized.
Is it about time we have some cultural transformation even at basic household level? Whereby when you tell we tell our kids that do not litter the compound. When you see litter, please stop and collect it, so that and also ensure we take it a notch higher and have this taught in schools. Is it possible to legislate culture?
Cultural issues are very difficult to legislate.
Yes.
They can only be handed down to generations. A society that is in chaos starts from the very basic unit of
the family.
The social institution, which is the family. Most folks around here, they move around, but how many parents would want to take time and tell their kids, you don't need to throw litter anyhow, you need to live in an organized way, you need to move around in an organized way. So those basic issues, at the end of the day, they splash out at a macro level, because at the micro level, they haven't really been catered for. But all of these things would have been better, at least institutionalized at the schooling level.
Yes.
You have very good schools, some good schools around the country, which insist on these very basic things. Most of the schools which I have attended in my life, especially my former high school, most of these smaller things, later gentle organization, perfectly executed. And I remember, I'm not attempting to chest thump here, but we were always ranked the cleanest school for many years that I was there. So at the end of the day, schools can help to fix these issues.
Yeah.
At the local level, you have these wards, you have the administrative, I mean the
county
local administrators.
administrator.
Yeah, village headmen at the local level and whatnot. County governments.
Yes.
Why don't they enforce this? And by the way, they are, as you mentioned, can these issues be legislated? It's not a surprise that some of those issues to do with order, they are well highlighted in some of those bylaws, which some
Just lack of discipline.
It's lack of
Yeah,
discipline.
because I remember countries like Rwanda have attempted to institutionalize the basic issues of order. Basic issues of order.
Yep.
The first Saturday of every month, it's a clean-up exercise for everyone.
Yeah.
It's just order. And a good example here in the country, when you try and drive along with the Ega Road,
Yes.
I don't know if it's because there's no PFC space there, but you reach traffic lights, and even if there is traffic,
Yes.
it's snarl up, you will just wait. Discipline.
Yeah.
Discipline. That seems to be what we're lacking in our country.
Absolutely.
And that's why I was tempted to even argue that is it about time that we institutionalize some of these things from a household level? Because you see, people talk of corruption as a big thing, but they don't know that it starts at household level.
Yeah, right.
We have reached a level whereby a parent, in their wisdom or lack of it, tell their child that please kuja nikutume alafu nitakupea peremende. Ama kuja nikutume alafu chukue shilingi tano kwa yako. You see, we are already encouraging that culture.
Yeah.
So I have to be incentivized to do something.
Do something.
So that is what, because they say the leaders you see today were formed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is it about time that we also look at the basic structures of our social institutions?
Definitely.
Yes.
When I was doing my undergraduate,
Yes.
we happened to have attended the same university.
Yes.
Of course, you are senior than me.
Yes.
You were there earlier than I did. No, I did a double major in economics and sociology.
Yes.
Sociology is a very interesting discipline. Understanding human societies or trying to understand how humans are organized is a very interesting thing. All these issues gravitate around leadership, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Why is the animal kingdom more organized, and why is the human society
In chaos.
in chaos? Why?
Yes.
And you realize animals will never pick fools to lead them. They'll always pick the cleverest
Yes.
and the most organized to lead their kingdoms and the societies. But since humans, I don't know, our capacity, our thinking capacities, they're quite diverse and whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, we can also learn from animals, you know. But at the end of the day, I think we need to restart thinking. I mean, we need to start thinking about how do we institutionalize these basic things at the family level.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Very small little things,
Yes,
which
I agree
can
with
be which can be enforced to the latter.
I
you know?
agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basic things to do with order and whatnot. And then also leading by example.
Yes.
You cannot be a parent talking of telling kids, okay, you need to wake up early, and yourself you're waking up at 10, 11. It doesn't work like that, right?
Yes.
So it's always integral to enforce these things at a family level.
The behavior change.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Behavior change would start from the smallest level, micro level, which is the family, and then it can scale up.
Yes.
But interestingly, one of the economists whom I like in this world is called Ha-Joon Chang. Ha-Joon Chang is a South Korean economist,
Yes.
but is also a British citizen. He happened to have, I think he's still teaching at Cambridge, the University of Cambridge in Britain. You know, he argues that when a country is developing, you can't really force people to be orderly. People throwing litter on the streets, everywhere. You know, you're having traffic chaos all over. Yes, you have traffic lights, but people are ignoring. You know, we don't really care and whatnot. So he argues that a society becomes orderly, or people generally become more disciplined when what happens when the economy generally develops and even the social conditions develop as well.
Mm.
That's what he argues. It could be true,
Yes.
but I think we just neglect to enforce most of these, even the smallest of laws that we have in whether the national government level or even at the county level.
Yes.
Yeah, so enforcement is a very big issue,
Thank you.
but I think each individual can play a role.
Thank you. As we shift gears towards the last part of this conversation,
Yep.
and perhaps this is the moment I take a minute and ask our viewers, those who are tuning in for the first time,
Yep.
please take a moment and subscribe to our channel, The Point, to enable us to continue providing this kind of content to you. And for those who have subscribed, we wish to thank you so much for being part and parcel of this process this far. Thank you so much.
Yep.
As we shift gears towards the last bit of this conversation,
Yes.
we have looked at where we are.
Mm.
Perhaps sometimes an appreciation of where we have come from would be helpful to try and understand whether can we compare or contrast where we are.
Mm.
Recently, we've seen a lot of developments, and these developments don't seem to be in isolation. In particular, we want to look at they have been given different terms from the time that we got independence.
Yep.
When we got independence, there was KANU and KADU.
Yeah.
KANU and KADU, KADU was cajoled into joining KANU under the guise that they were delaying independence,
Yeah.
and they were onboarded, and it made them compromise on their ideas, including the Majimbo federal system of government.
Yes.
So what comes out is when you come together, there's some compromise, and to the extent to which you compromise, some good things might be lost.
Yes.
So we saw KANU coming together with KADU, and that hastened us getting independence. And but I want us to focus on this new monster called whether it's cooperation, handshake, whether it is whatever it is. It began with President Kibaki and the Honorable Raila Odinga under the government of the National Accord.
Yes.
Of course, following the events of 2007, 29th December 2007, we all know what happened. So I want you to apply your mind as a geopolitical analyst. You would journey us through what you see. Is there anything good out of these corporations, or they were just marriage of convenience, of political convenience, or is it the way to go, or is it a monster that should have not been allowed to be there in the first place? So we have the Kibaki-Odinga Corporation, which was the National Accord. That is 2008, 2012. Then in come Kibaki, Ruto and Uhuru. Of course, they are on their own marriage at URP, TNA. They formed the government. Then the second term events that unfolded.
Yep.
9th March, we had the handshake between President Kenyatta and Prime Minister Raila Odinga. And then we went to elections, 2017, the election was nullified, we went back to elections, and now we are on the verge of we've seen there's some attempt for cooperation between Raila Odinga and William Ruto, although it is implicitly, no one comes out to say this is what we're doing. So could you journey us through and tell us through, as an observer, is there anything good you are reading from this, and is that the best way for the country?
Well, my brother Duncan, when you look at the history of the so-called handshakes and political cooperation in this country, these are interesting political events, and they date as far as as far back as the time when Kenya was just about to get independence, and even in the post-colonial, post-colonial history of Kenya. Very interesting that in 1997, and even before I come to 1997, before Jaramogi Odinga died, there was an attempted cooperation between Jaramogi and Arap Moi. I remember that time Jaramogi was then appointed, I think, the chairperson of the Kenya Cotton Board.
He called me, yes.
Something like that, but then the cooperation never fully materialized because then Jaramogi died before everything was finalized. But the most resolute of all cooperations since, in Kenya's recent political history Then we can go back to 1997. After the 1997 elections, which Moi won with around 2.5 million votes, Kibaki was second, I think with around 1.9 million votes. Raila Odinga was third, I think, with almost 667,000 votes, if I can remember. Then Michael Kijana Malwa followed him, I think with around 500 and something votes, 1,000 votes. And then Charity Ngilu came a distant, I think, fifth, with around 400 and something thousand votes. These guys were in the opposition, led by Kibaki, Odinga, Wamalwa, and Ngilu. They disputed the outcome of the elections.
Yes.
And they were right, because I mean, whatever Moi was doing, whatever Moi did to win the elections, he interfered directly with the electoral process.
Yes.
You know, that is well documented in history. So, the opposition leaders had rejected in totality the outcome of the elections, and they were meeting to scheme how they are going, you know, to push probably for fresh elections or something close
That's
to
what
that.
it is.
But then, of course, by then the president was the state. The president was so powerful, he commanded all the institutions.
Yes.
Very powerful figure. That never deterred Moi in any way to, you know, not to be sworn in for his final term in office. So on the 6th of January 1998, Moi was sworn in for his final term. Then, in between the meetings of these opposition leaders, Odinga said that there was no willingness for any of them, you know, to push the conversation forward, and there were suspicions that some of them were being approached by Moi to work with him, because after the elections, KANU had around 107 members of parliament. The opposition collectively had 103 members of parliament. So KANU did not have an absolute majority that it was comfortable with. So it was up to KANU to reach out to these other parties for cooperation, you know. So Moi, of course, had his own miseries whom he could send to these opposition leaders. Of course, they first approached my former member of parliament, Kijana Malwa, for cooperation. There were issues about how they could formalize the agreement. Then, out of the blues, Odinga announced on that particular day, the 6th of January 1998, when Moi was sworn in. Odinga said he congratulated Moi and said he was not going to pursue any other action, you know, to try and
upset status quo.
Yes, you know. So he left these other opposition leaders in the dark. He went ahead, announced that the NDP then, his party, the National Development Party, was willing to cooperate with any other party, including KANU. And he reached out to Moi, he wrote to Moi. Moi sent his emissaries, including the former MP who was trounced by Ruto in 1997, Ruben Chesire, and nominated MP then, Makto. Buanadao. They reached out to Moi, I mean to Odinga. And then they formalized that agreement. And NDP started cooperating with
government.
Yes, but it never stopped there. In somewhere along, 2001, I think it must have been June 2001, some of the MPs from the National Development Party, Odinga's party, then were appointed as ministers in KANU's government.
Then it was after 18th March 2002, 2001.
No, for the March one, we had more NDP MPs being appointed to the cabinet when now KANU merged with the NDP. That was
Odinga was made as G for KANU.
Absolutely. Now that was March 18th of March 2002.
Yes.
So all these preceding political events, they were not without any interest. I'll come to these other corporations. But then, Odinga had interest in the Kenya cotton mills. And then also some of his friends and other cronies were also appointed in government, in other positions apart from the ministries and whatnot. It never stopped there. What came out then when Moi did not agree to Odinga's ambitions in the lead up to the 2002 elections. He moved out, then joined hands with other so-called Kanu dissidents, Kalonzo, Mudia Wari, Saitoti, William Chimama, and others, when they formed the LDP, which others will also refer to it as the Rainbow Coalition and whatnot. They later on they joined hands with the NK led by
Ngilu Wamalwa and the tree of Kibaki, yes.
After that, you had the referendum, and then you had, I think, one of the hotly contested elections ever in Kenya's history in 2007.
Yes.
With all the chaos, well, if you ask me, I'd say Odinga clearly won those elections. Krigler may dispute that. But we had now the Grand Coalition. After that, we've had all these handshakes, Kenyatta, and now William Ruto. But there are certain fundamentals, Duncan, which, for the benefit of our viewers, I want people to understand.
Yes.
This is purely politics, power politics.
Interest.
Number one, self-interest is what dictates, supersedes all these underhand deals that are concerned with political corporations and the so-called handshakes in this country. Self-interest. Number two, common citizens, most of them, do not understand that with power politics, what comes into play is that the end justifies the means and vice versa. Another basic principle which needs to be understood is that there is no betrayal in politics, by the way. Most people will move around and say, okay, so and so has been betrayed. But when you commit yourself to studying the history of power politics, I don't think there's betrayal. Politics, in its essence, is about scheming and winning power. That is the objective. The end justifies
the means, and vice versa.
So, economic interests. Most of these high-ranking politicians in this country, they're very rich fellows. So they also want to protect their businesses and their wealth.
Yes.
That's a reality which most citizens never want to understand. So people want to get the people would want to be emotional, say, okay, this guy misled or he has betrayed his followers. But that's not the case. Even with the current so-called cooperation, which has not come out clearly in the public, but I mean, for Ruto and Odinga to meet, then what does it mean? These guys must have sat down at some point and discussed. It may not have happened in Kenya. We only saw it surfacing in Uganda. But I'm very sure they had discussions here internally. You may ask yourself, why did those anti-government protests which were being organized by the Azimio coalition
stop?
Why did they stop? There was something cooking. There were even rumors. Ruto and Odinga at one time, I think they must have met in Mombasa.
Under the leadership of Obasanjo.
Yes, they did meet, and that's a reality. So, with the current cooperation, what comes out of that, definitely, Odinga has his own interest. I wouldn't fail to state that one of the interests where maybe Ruto and other of his men, where they're interested in, the gas industry business. We know Odinga is a big wig in that, right? Ruto also is coming up strongly in that sector. So definitely, protection of interests, very, very important. And people should never run away from those realities. And we've seen Ruto clearly campaigning for Raila to ascend to the chairmanship of the Africa Union Commission, right? Although recently we saw some murmurs, Odinga is criticizing the government, and all this hullabaloo that it has created. So interest.
Do you think he's getting it?
I think it's time for East Africa to get that position, Eastern Africa in general, to assume the position of the Africa Union Commission.
AUC.
Yes. Although Somalia, they have a
Djibouti.
candidate. Djibouti also have a candidate. But I think Odinga has a head start in that. If at all, what has happened over the last 2-3 days, if it is true, that creates some friction.
Yes.
But I don't think those other candidates are weighty compared to Raila Odinga. I mean, Raila Odinga is a man of connections. He's a global figure. He's a global figure.
You don't think it's some people say it's a new form of con. It's being conned, and before you know it, you lose it.
See, I've just talked about interests. Well, if you, I mean, I have to tell you that I've supported Odinga for so many years. Many years. There are some strategic mistakes which Odinga has made in his political career. One of them being the last handshake with Kenyatta in 2018. That consumed his, it affected his political trajectory, even going to the last elections in 2022. For sure, that affected him. He never managed to get rid of that tag that now Odinga is, quote unquote, the deputy president to Uhuru, when literally we knew it was Ruto who was the deputy president, and all those kind of things. So we have to acknowledge the fact that these are the sunset years of Odinga, of course biologically and even politically.
Yes.
He has all the right to run, in future elections, but I think as things stand, perhaps some of the conversations could have been, okay, we are supporting you for the Africa Union Commission chairmanship.
Advocate the political scene.
Yes. In return, we are trying to tell you, Mr. Ndoa Jam, retire peacefully, go home, and then, because as long as you're the president of Kenya and Odinga is there, I swear you'll never have peace. You'll never have peace. So, and Ruto knows, we know Ruto is politically smart. Running government is totally different from winning elections. But he knows as long as Odinga is there, then things can be hard for him.
Okay.
He also understands that if Odinga is completely out of Kenyan politics, then he may not really have a strong competitor. That's for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
As we wind up this conversation, we have President Ruto is the 5th president of the Republic of Kenya.
Yep.
Meaning we have 5 phases. We've seen 5 phases, four complete phases of leadership.
Yep.
Is there any that stands out for you as outstanding that perhaps went out of his way to make Kenya a better place to live in, and or are they all failures?
Well, Kibaki, I think, attempted to do a good job. We have to give him credit. After 24 years of misrule by Moi, Moi had maybe a few positive things which you can credit him for.
At least there was no Al-Shabaab attack during these 24 years.
Yeah, but what Moi did in Kenya.
And the highest hunger went to 38 shillings.
Yeah, but I've always told people, you don't need even 5 years in office. Any office, it doesn't matter whether it's a political office, an elective office, any office. You don't need 5 years to prove that you are able to deliver on something, or the promises which you've made. 1, 2, 3 years are enough for you to show intention that you intend to change Kenya. Kibaki did that. Before all the politics blew up in 2005, in the lead up to the 2005 referendum, when NAG was visibly collapsing. 2003, 2004, you had the economic recovery strategy on wealth creation being put in place, fully implemented. It generally set Kenya on a path for economic takeoff. 2 good years of fantastic achievement. He turned around things. Of course, he failed. He had the opportunity to kill corruption, but unfortunately, tribalism,
Cronyism.
Absolutely. He never got himself out of the hook as far as those issues are concerned. Well, you know, I come across many people who say, oh no, his kitchen cabinet, the fellows who failed him. But I mean, you're the president.
Leadership.
You know,
Leadership
again.
Leadership.
The Grand Coalition government, by the way, even when you ask those fellows who are the wheeler dealers, the power brokers, and the who and who in the Grand Coalition government, it stands out as the most accomplished and so far the best cabinet Kenya's ever had since independence.
That I concur, because I recently had a conversation on the sidelines of the Wage Conference with Ambassador Mugaura. And on the sidelines, he was telling me that one of the best cabinet he ever served as the head of public service and secretary of the cabinet was the one that had 44 ministers.
Exactly.
That's what he said, one of the best. And he says, according to him, that would stand out as in the entire history of Kenya for some good time.
Yeah. And you see, you have 44 ministers. You've not counted the assistant ministers, who are almost double that number. So you know, ministers plus the assistants, over 100. In fact, close to 120. In total. That's a huge team. But it stood out. It achieved a lot. One thing which Kibaki, I think, did well was in terms of delegation of duty. If I'm the leader, I don't need to micromanage you. First of all, appoint the right people, as we said initially. To do the right job. To do the right job. Once you let them come to you and report to you that okay, here we've hit a dead wall. We embarked on this. We are here. Yes. There's a challenge that we want to unlock for us to proceed forward. Tell us the way forward. That's what you need. But what we are seeing with this regime is purely micromanagement. More used to do the same thing. A friend of mine was joking yesterday, telling me that a day before Machogu was upbeat about school reopening. Then tomorrow the president says the school has been suspended indefinitely. Exactly. Those are the teething issues that we are talking about, as far as leadership is concerned. But Jomo Kenyatta, Jomo Kenyatta had his own issues, but I think how I track them, he could come close to Kibaki. Uhuru, his second term, he was a bit better. He was actually far much better than the first time. You know, this coalition politics. Again, you're comparing him with himself. Yes. You know. So Jomo Kenyatta did well again from the historical records which are there. Is there hope that William is going to do a good job? I had no hope before the election. I had no hope after he was elected. You have no hope. I had no hope when he appointed his cabinet. And still, I'm hopeless. In short, you are saying that there is nothing inspiring that can, time can improve that. Nothing. See, it starts with the basics. Who are the people you get on board? Who are the people you are a product of your environment? Yes. So if you're the appointing authority, then people start saying, "Oh no, it's not President Ruto who is the problem. It is the people." The ministers who them. But he's the appointing authority. If I'm the president. I've appointed you, there is a fertilizer scandal, I'll sack you. If you're the president, things are not moving well as far as, you know, the Nyayo house, you know, how we go through hell applying for passports. Yes. If you're not doing your work, I'll fire you. Go home. Yes. Thank you. This conversation cannot end today, and clearly it is evident that because we've already eaten into our time so much, but the time is well spent. I want to give you 1 minute to look at this camera and speak to the people in this enterprise we call Kenya, right from the CEO of this enterprise to the membership, the shareholders of this enterprise, as we come to a wrap. Yes. Okay. Kenya cannot change if we do not embrace our social, political, and economic realities. We all have our own traditions. As a country, we have our history, part of which is good, part of which is not good. And we need bold leadership, we need decisive leadership, we need vigilant leadership to change this country. And leadership doesn't just start from the presidency. All of us, however small we may be or appear to be, we have a bigger role to play as far as changing the fortunes of this country is concerned. So it's a collective enterprise that all of us are shareholders, and we need to be heard, and we need to voice our concerns, and we can change this country for the better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my guest, Sitati Wasilwa. It's been an honor and a privilege to have this conversation. Clearly, a very insightful conversation that we have, I must admit. And there's a lot more that we can have conversations on this, and I believe my viewers will find this conversation very timely. And as a wrap, we have today learned that all you require as a country to make progress, leadership, leadership, leadership. And then that has to be supported by pragmatism and honesty. Those are the trio pillars that need to be put in place. And we need to breathe leadership, pragmatism, and honesty in all aspects. And these need to permeate from the basic level of social institution, which is the family, all the way to the macro level, which is the government and the business enterprises. Thank you so much for this conversation, and for those who are tuning in for the first time, this is the point where we have insightful conversations with thought leaders on different aspects of society. And we aspire to continue doing this, and we rely on your support. For those who have not subscribed, kindly subscribe to our channel. And for those who have subscribed, and we thank you so much for continuing to be part of this process. They say all is well that starts well and must end well. I've been your host, Duncan. Until we do this some other time, thank you so much. Asante.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
So much.
Thanks.
Asante.